There's a story Napoleon Hill wrote, but it never made it to the final pages of his most famous book. A story that wasn't forgotten, but deliberately edited out because it was deemed too powerful for the general public. And yet, within it lay one of the most brutal lessons on wealth and failure you could ever know. Hill believed that some truths could only be understood by those who were truly ready. He knew that revealing certain principles could generate resistance, fear, and even rejection. Therefore, he left some passages hidden, accessible only to those willing to look beyond the words. This is one of them. The curious thing is that the secret of this narrative lies not only in what it tells, but in what it demands of those who listen. It's a story that offers not comfort, but confrontation. It doesn't bother to soothe the pain, because true transformation is rarely gentle. And that's precisely why this story was left aside, not because it was irrelevant, but because it carried with it an impact that could divide people into those who awaken and those who remain in the illusion. Hill knew that not everyone was ready for this brutal difference. Today, you'll hear this story for the first time, not as a lost legend, but as a mirror held before you, because each line speaks not only of a forgotten character, but also of the choices you make in your own life. By uncovering this episode, you'll be able to clearly see why some thrive while others spend their entire lives trying, never moving from the same point. This isn't an empty promise, but an invitation to look at yourself with courage. If you stay with me until the end, you'll have a rare key in your hands, the ability to transform knowledge into action, and hesitation into decision. It's this shift that Hill wanted to show, but never captured in his pages. So take a deep breath and open up some space within yourself, because what you're about to discover could be the turning point you've been waiting for. This isn't just a censored story. It's a reminder that the difference between success and failure can be in a single instant. Few people know that Hill didn't publish everything he wrote. Behind the scenes of Think and Grow Rich, there were crossed out passages, omitted stories, and notes that never reached the hands of the general reader. These were not disposable texts, but impactful passages, charged with a power that, according to him, could be misinterpreted. Among these fragments was the so-called censored story. It wasn't erased by chance, but silenced because it revealed a principle that could sound too harsh, that most people don't fail out of ignorance, but out of cowardice in the face of their own lives. And this message could shock those who only sought easy formulas. This truth remains uncomfortable to this day. Think about how many times you've heard valuable advice but failed to apply it. The problem wasn't a lack of information, but the weight of doubt, the fear of consequences, and the difficulty of breaking through inertia. It's like carrying a treasure map without ever taking the first step toward the X that marks its location. The wealth doesn't disappear, but it remains inaccessible because the map's owner never dared to get up and seek it. This is the essence of Hill's observation. In censoring this story, Hill didn't consider it pointless. On the contrary, he understood that not everyone would be willing to hear that knowledge without courage is a burden, not a gift. It was safer to remove this truth from the immediate reach of the masses. But what was kept silent can now be revealed. And when you hear this lesson, you begin to realize how it affects your own journey. How many decisions have you avoided out of fear? How many paths have you abandoned out of insecurity? This is the most disturbing part, realizing that it's not others, nor fate, that limit your life. Often, it's you who erect the invisible barriers. And this is the shock that the story brings to light. Today, by reclaiming this narrative, we have the chance to face the shadow head-on, not as a criticism, but as an opportunity. Because what was silenced in the past may be the missing piece for your present. At the center of this story was a young apprentice. He followed Hill closely, wrote down every word, and believed that this was the roadmap to prosperity. He had intelligence, dedication, and curiosity, but he carried a problem that seemed impossible to overcome: indecision. Whenever an opportunity rose, his mind filled with questions. What if I can't do it? What if people judge me? What if it fails? With each doubt, he retreated. Fear spoke louder than any acquired knowledge. This pattern repeated itself like an endless cycle. The young man read, studied, absorbed the principles, but when the time came to act, he was stopped by his own shadows. The accumulated wisdom became mere weight because it was not transformed into movement. He was like someone carrying a golden key, but never daring to open the door. With each failed attempt, he lost not only time, but also trust. And worst of all, I was starting to believe that perhaps the key didn't work, when the real problem was that I'd never even tried to turn it. Hill observed this behavior with interest. He didn't just see a hesitant student, but a reflection of most people. How many live exactly like this? They know what they need to do, but they don't move because they wait for a perfect signal that never arrives. The curious thing is that, despite his insecurity, this apprentice was seen by others as promising. He had a sparkle in his eyes, but also the weight of fear etched on his face. He was a mixture of potential and paralysis, like a diamond trapped inside a rock. And it was precisely this combination that caught Hill's attention. He decided to record the story, not as a failure, but as a faithful portrait of the human dilemma, between knowing and acting, between dreaming and achieving, between hoping and daring. The young man didn't realize it, but he was about to face a decision that would change the course of his life. And it was this moment that Hill would transform into a powerful lesson, so powerful that it ended up being left off the page. The decisive day arrived without warning. The apprentice was presented with a real opportunity, a chance to commit to a project capable of changing his destiny. There was no time for long reflections. He had to decide right then and there, in front of everyone, whether to move forward or retreat again. The tension was palpable. His eyes darted back and forth, caught between fear and hope. His hands were sweating, his heart was racing, and the silence of the room weighed like a ton on his shoulders. It was as if every second screamed the question he'd been avoiding for years. Will you live, or will you hesitate once more? That moment encapsulated his entire story. It didn't matter how much he had studied or how many notes he had in his notebooks. It all boiled down to a simple but definitive choice: act or retreat. And that decision would say more about his future than any other. Hill described this scene as an internal battlefield. There were no external enemies, only the invisible struggle between courage and fear. A silent war that, deep down, we all know. And perhaps this is the most revealing part, realizing that the greatest confrontation in your life is never against others, but against yourself, against your doubts, your blocks, and the inner voices that insist on telling you don't do it. Now, I want to bring you into this scene, because, like that young man, perhaps you too have experienced a moment like this, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that seemed capable of turning your life upside down. Tell me, do you remember a moment like that? A choice that put you between doubt and courage? If so, share it in the comments. Your reflection may inspire others who are experiencing the same struggle right now. This is the invitation that history makes, to remember that sometimes your entire journey can be summed up in a few seconds, and that it is precisely in those seconds that your destiny is written. What happened next changed that young man's life forever. After seconds of silence that felt like an eternity, he took a deep breath and decided to act. There were no guarantees, no promises of victory, but in that moment, he understood that waiting for absolute safety would be like waiting forever. The decision wasn't just practical, it was also emotional. By saying yes, he broke with years of accumulated hesitation. It was like breaking an invisible chain that had bound him to fear. The simple act of taking responsibility transformed him into someone different, from an insecure apprentice to the protagonist of his own story. Hill reported that the atmosphere around him changed immediately. Where there had previously been distrust and expectation, respect now emerged. People realized that this young man was willing to take risks, and this sparked a new perspective on him. The world, after all, responds differently to those who demonstrate courage. This step revealed a powerful lesson. Imperfect action is worth more than infinite preparation. The young man didn't have all the answers, but he had the willingness to take the plunge anyway. This is what opened doors, attracted opportunities, and set his life in motion. The curious thing is that the decision didn't eliminate his fear. His heart still raced, his doubts still lingered. But by crossing the threshold, he discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. And that was the key that unlocked his transformation. Soon, results began to appear. The project prospered, the right people approached him, and the young man began to be recognized as a leader. What once seemed unattainable now became reality, the fruit of a single moment of boldness. Hill saw in this scene the synthesis of a hidden principle. Knowing is not enough, wanting is not enough, planning is not enough. It is action that changes destinies. That's why he decided to write this story, even though he knew it might be too intense for most. The young man didn't know it, but that day he had inaugurated a new version of himself. It wasn't just about money or success, but the discovery that courage is the root of all riches. And it was precisely this detail that transformed his life into an eternal example. What Hill realized, and what few are willing to accept, is that the true secret of this story lay not in the young man's victory, but in the contrast between knowing and doing. Most believe that accumulating knowledge is enough, But the censorship of this narrative made it clear: information without action is just an illusion. The hidden principle is harsh but liberating. It asserts that the courage to act carries more weight than years of preparation without movement. It doesn't matter how many books you read or how many courses you take. If there's no decision, everything becomes just accumulated baggage with no practical use. Hill understood this was a sensitive point. After all, how many people pride themselves on knowing a lot but remain stuck in the same old rut? This excessive theory creates a false sense of progress, while in practice nothing changes. It's a disguised comfort that imprisons. The censored story revealed this clearly. The young man only changed his life when he stopped waiting for certainty and took risks. His courage was the bridge that transformed knowledge into results. This was the part Hill believed few would bear to hear. And perhaps you've felt this way too. How many times have you accumulated information, planned every detail, but indefinitely postponed the first step? How many dreams were shelved because you waited for the right moment that never arrived? This is the essence of the hidden principle. Fear will always exist, and doubt will always whisper. The difference lies in who chooses to move forward anyway, because life doesn't reward the most prepared, but the most willing. By omitting this story, Hill knew he was protecting those unwilling to hear that the greatest enemy of prosperity is not a lack of intelligence, but a lack of resolve. This is a revelation that can shake one's inner foundations. But for those who accept this truth, something changes forever. Courage becomes seen not as an exception, but as a habit. And it is at this point that the wealth mindset begins to form, not just in theory, but in living practice. If the courageous decision opened doors for the young man, what would have happened if he had backed out? Hill asked himself this question as he wrote the story and knew exactly what the answer would be. The price of inaction is invisible but devastating. Every missed opportunity turns into accumulated regret. Imagine if that apprentice had hesitated one more time. His life would have followed the same pattern: broken promises, abandoned ideas, and a mediocre destiny written by indecision. He would have become just another of those who know a lot but achieve little. The cost of this doesn't show up immediately. It manifests slowly, like a silent tax. Time passes, the years advance, and before you know it, you've already missed the opportunities that could have changed everything. This is the true price of inaction. Hill called this a form of living death. Not physical death, but the death of dreams, confidence, and creative energy. Because every time you back down, you reinforce the belief that you're not capable. And that belief becomes a mental prison that's nearly impossible to break. The contrast with the young man's courageous attitude is stark. On one side, prosperity and movement. On the other, stagnation and regret. The line separating these destinies is thin, almost imperceptible, but it is drawn by a simple decision: act or retreat. This is the reflection you need to bring to your own life. How many opportunities have you missed out on because you hesitated? How many times have you postponed an important step because you waited until you were more ready? And will that readiness ever arrive? The lesson is clear. Waiting is too costly. The young man only changed because he decided to. Had he waited, he would have paid the high price of inaction. And it is this price that many pay in silence every day. If this message resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel now. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we share lessons that can change destinies. And perhaps your next step begins precisely by not postponing this decision. The decisive moment showed that the line between wealth and failure is thinner than many imagine. The young man succeeded not because he knew better, but because he dared to cross the chasm that separates desire from action. This crossing, silent and invisible to others, was the true revolution in his life. Hill recorded this episode not to celebrate success, but to show the contrast. The apprentice's courage exposed a truth few accept. It's not a lack of knowledge that keeps people poor, but a fear of action. This is the silent ghost that steals fortunes before they're even born. The story's climax reveals that wealth isn't just about money, it's about identity. The moment the young man said yes, he went from being someone trapped in hesitation to someone driven by action. This new self was the true treasure he had gained. And this is the most uncomfortable part, realizing that nothing external needs to change for your life to transform. What changes is how you decide to respond to opportunities. The world remains the same, but you are no longer the same person after courage. Hill knew this revelation would be deeply disturbing. After all, it lifts the weight of circumstances and places responsibility back in our hands. It's not about waiting for life to get better, but about deciding to live differently now. The young man proved this in practice. The same reality, that had previously seemed limiting opened up before him after a single decision. It was as if the entire universe had been waiting just for that moment to align its pieces. And it all began with a simple gesture: taking action. This turning point is the heart of the censored story. It's a reminder that your life can change radically in seconds, as long as you're willing to push through fear. The climax isn't in the success achieved, but in the instant you free yourself from the invisible prison of hesitation. And here's the question that echoes to this day: will you keep waiting, or will you choose to act? Because the truth is, your next decision could be the deciding factor between staying where you are or moving toward the future you've always wanted. That young man's decision marked more than an individual success. It became a silent record in Hill's notebooks, a reminder that true transformation doesn't depend on ready-made formulas, but on the courage to overcome fear. This was the legacy that survived, even without being published in book form. Hill knew that not everyone was ready for this kind of revelation, so he kept the story hidden, as if it were a secret reserved only for those ready to see beyond the words. It was a lesson that could not be delivered superficially. The curious thing is that the young man never became famous. His name doesn't appear on covers or in records of great achievements, but his attitude echoed between the lines of one of Hill's greatest teachings: the value of decision surpasses any accumulated knowledge. This anonymity reveals something important. True wealth doesn't need applause or public recognition. It arises within those who dare to choose, and expands silently in the form of opportunities, confidence, and freedom. The apprentice discovered this early. For Hill, the legacy of this episode was clear. It doesn't matter whether the world celebrates your courage, or whether no one applauds. What matters is the impact it has on your own life. Victory happens first within, before it manifests itself externally. And this is where the story connects with you. How many times have you waited for recognition from others before taking a step? How many times have you given up because there were no external guarantees? This is the reminder that transformation begins quietly, away from the spotlight. This is also the hook for another revelation Hill left secretly recorded: a silent meeting that multiplied fortunes, without words, solely through the power of a hidden principle. An even more mysterious story, one that completes what you just heard. If this episode of Censored History made sense to you, be sure to watch the video about it, the silent meeting in it. You'll discover how to apply the same principle to your life and multiply not only your network of contacts, but also your results. Napoleon Hill's censored story isn't just a forgotten tale. It's a powerful reminder that destiny is defined in seconds, the instant you choose to act or remain trapped in fear. The young apprentice didn't win by chance, but because he dared to cross the abyss of hesitation. This is the point Hill knew few would accept. It's not about intelligence, luck, or circumstances. It's about the courage to decide. With every choice you postpone, you feed the prison of doubt. With every step you take, however imperfect, you open doors that fear tried to keep closed. Hill's silence in hiding this story was also a test. Only those who search deeper, who aren't content with easy answers, reach this level of understanding. And if you've made it this far, it's because you're part of this group willing to see beyond. Now, the question remains simple. What decision do you need to make today? Not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect, but now. Because this is the moment your future is being written with courage or hesitation. As you look back at your life, realize how many opportunities have passed before your eyes. Some you seized, others you let slip away. But the big difference always lies in the same root: the choice you made at the right time or the choice you postponed. This is the final message of this censored story. You don't need more answers, you need more courage. Because life has never rewarded those who wait indefinitely, but always opens up to those who dare to take the first step. And before you go any further, I want to extend an invitation. If this story has touched you, don't stop here. There is another, even more mysterious revelation: a silent meeting that multiplied fortunes and revealed the power of a hidden Hill principle. Watch the video. A Booth silent meeting gets the perfect complement to what you've heard today, and could be the next step that will expand your vision of prosperity. The decision is yours, and perhaps that's exactly the choice that will change everything.